we're here.
Here we go. We have.
All right. Just work a bit better. So to give you an idea, what usually happens is the software administrator would the developers would take the code and they would provide it to the software administrator. You would install it, and then at one point it would work fine, but then one day it would stop working. And then the software developers would blame the systems administrator, and the systems administrators would blame the software developers. Am I right? Okay. So today we're going to talk about actually some of the problems with servers. But because I'm a realist, but I'm also optimist, I'm going to talk about some of the easiest ways to find those problems, and also how to fix them. Right, so I'm just moving things around a bit. So, I'm going to talk about the common issues, but also how to identify and how to prevent them. So, firstly, what you might want to find out is what is server management. And I'm being the cameraman as well as the administrator today. There's not a very easy definition online, but one definition that we do have is systems management. Okay? And systems management refers to the enterprise-wide administration of distributed systems, which includes computer systems. So it's interesting that we talk about server management or systems management, but it only includes computer systems. The reason why this is important is you must think of nothing is an island. No man is an island, right? So the same with servers, the same with your code. You usually have a system or a network. On top of the network you have the physical hardware, the servers. On those servers it's running an operating system. And then lastly you have the application or the code which you wrote. Now usually you have different teams that look after these different parts. What we're starting to get nowadays with software-defined infrastructure, you're starting to get both the developers and the infrastructure managers or the infrastructure guys working together to get a product working. Right, but I'll ask a question. Both you guys as well as the people in this room, you can tell me, when something goes wrong, when we're at this point where your software is not working on the server, what do? I'll give you a hint. Okay? Think about management. So, can I ask you? You're smiling. What is the first thing that you do when there's a problem?
System management.
Yes.
Services.
Yeah. Oh, you're asking questions. Good. Well, that's good. You know, I get that response often. So, something is wrong, you ask questions. That's good. That's great. Let's take it back. Let's make it real. Let's say I just had a heart attack right now. What do?
I will ask you the system administrator.
You ask questions again. Good. But I'll teach something about having a heart attack, as well as with systems administration. The first thing you do is you ask for help. Okay? So if someone collapses here, you call someone, dial 911 or 999, or what is the number in Egypt for the police?
112.
112. Dial 112. So the same with systems. First thing is log it in the help desk, guys. As soon as a problem happens, create a log. Send the email, tell them what is wrong. Or tell them what you think is wrong. Quick email. The reason why this is important is from the time that you inform someone something's wrong, that is when the problem occurred. Okay? That is when people start looking at fixing it. This can affect your service level agreements, all kinds of things like that. So then secondly, you ask the questions. You determine what is wrong and then find out how to fix it. And thirdly is you should actually test this fix, right? You don't just implement it because it can have other effects. After you test it, you apply the fix and you roll back to backup, and then you document the problem. And important, you document the solution. And one thing that we like to do as well, not all organizations do it, it depends, is you create an incident report. The incident report is useful to find out when did you find out about the problem, what did you do, what were the tasks, at what time did it get fixed, and then you write how can we prevent this from happening. Because it's not always software, it's not always technical problems, sometimes there's managerial problems. You know, you weren't informed, you know, or someone was informed but they didn't tell you, they didn't tell the right person. All right. So this is another question I have. Imagine you're a systems administrator. Or even better, you just joined a new company, okay, you're the programmer, and you have a systems administrator, and it's his first day on the job. So what do you think quite often is that server administrator's first problem? Do you guys have an idea? What would you say is the first general problem?
I think network problems.
Network, yeah, that's true. It could be technical, but you'll be surprised that often this is the problem. The first problem you run into, limited documentation. Think about it. You've just been told there's a server, it's not working, there's code not working on it, but often you don't even know the server exists. You didn't know it existed. Okay? So common causes of this is what we call inheriting an orphan server. Okay, orphan or zombie server. But there's easy ways to fix this. Firstly, your whole organization, if you work in IT, you should have standard. George was talking about standardization of tools and processes. So in IT infrastructure management, there's something called ITIL, Information Technology Information Library. That's where you define the services that you have available, the product catalog, but you also define methods of documentation, amongst other things. But then also using requests for change, okay, for making changes. So if you ask the system administrator, can you open up those ports, or just go and make this change, just go and make this configuration. A good systems administrator would, even if you asked him at the water cooler, he would email the help desk, even if he is the help desk. And then he goes through the help desk, work on the log over there, document it, go through the RFC, and implement it. It could still take as little as 5 minutes to do all of those. But the benefit is if he goes on holiday, people know what changed. Right? Another thing is keep that documentation centrally. It's happened often when you ask someone, do you have is your service are your servers documented? And they say yes, it's very much documented. Where's the documentation? Oh, it's on my laptop. Where's your laptop? Oh, at home. Right? So keep it centrally. Also important is keep the backup of your documentation. Treat it just as important as the backup of your server. Okay? Because if your server goes and you need to do a brand new server, if you don't have the documentation, it's difficult. Now, if you're doing programming as well, and if you're about to be running your own test servers, there's a tool called Git. Are you familiar with Git? Okay, for version control. This is for your code. I really highly suggest for all of you, if you're starting to do code, especially global software development, as well as just working in multiple teams, to use a central repository for your code where you do version control. So you can check it out, change the code, but you can crucially go back in time and see what previous edits was, who made the edits. That is more on the software development side. When it comes to administration, there is a tool called etc Keeper, which works in a similar way. It makes a local repository, and if your system administrator makes these changes, you can go back in time and see what were the changes, what was made. Okay. So there's something called DevOps. So have you heard of DevOps? Okay, how about my guys on that side? Have you heard the term DevOps? Yes or no?
Sorry, we didn't hear you.
Alright. There's something called DevOps. That's better. I like something. Right, so DevOps is something which literally stands for the two different types. One is two things put together, developers and operations. They used to, like I explained in the beginning, they used to be two complete separate things. You had the developers fighting with the operations. Okay, now we're working together, call it DevOps. Benefits of this is, some of it is software defined. So we're using things like automation of the configuration of the servers by using declarative language. So that is where we don't just go, we need a new server, we go and install it, even if it's virtual, right? It's the same work. Go and install it, configure it. No, we don't start there. We start with declarative language where we say, we want a server. We want the server to have Apache. We want the server to have this virtual host. We want the server to configure itself with NTP, the time server. So we go and define all of those things first. And then we use that configuration file to deploy the different servers. So to a degree, you've already prevented some of the problems by using, your configuration files are your documentation to a degree. It helps the developers and the programmers from the beginning to work together. There's a lot more. This talk isn't about DevOps. We can speak for 5 hours about DevOps. Some of the tools that are available with DevOps some of the tools that enable DevOps is Puppet, Chef, Ansible. It keeps growing, but those are some of the big ones. All right. So let's get back to some of the other examples. Like I said, I'm not only going to say what happens quite often, but also how to fix it. Why, as a developer, would you like to know this? Well, one, your code is going to run on a server. Right? Almost everything nowadays runs on server. The second thing is your systems administrator might not know this information. So if you know it and you're working close together, you're helping yourself and you're helping them. All right. So another example of things that crash is the web service, okay, the database, or the users tell you that they can't log in. Right? So your server is running perfectly, but the users can't log in. Your server is running perfectly, but the website can't show. Often one of the causes, what do you guys think? Oh, I should go one back. Imagine that didn't happen, okay? Imagine you didn't see what was on the screen, and I want the smartest person in this room or on the screen to tell me what could cause this to happen. Hands up. And we're going to grab you. Okay, you saw the answer, okay? So the answer is often what happens is the hard drive just runs out of space. There's easy ways to fix this. One is to change, fix it by using multiple partitions or using multiple hard drives. You want to use one for the operating system and another one for your data or your applications. Sometimes you can even have one just for the logs. So if you have a database, you often would have the database on a certain partition, and if that database has certain logs, you'd have even the logs on a separate partition. One of the reasons you'd like to do this is if you get attacked, the error logs would grow, right? And it would continue growing. If that's on the same space as the operating system, the whole computer, the whole server would crash. If it's on the same drive as the database would stop working because there's no space for it to grow. Does that make sense? And crucially, plan from the beginning. So even though your software, even though your program might be very small at the moment, think about it. What would change if instead of having 100 users, we have 1,000 users? What would change between 1,000 users to 10,000 users? What would change from 10,000 users to 1,000,000 users? Okay, and you think about that. So what I showed over here is just some of the things that often happens, and you learn how to deal with these. But part of the problem is when you find out that happened, it's already too late. Do you agree? It already means there's already a problem. And part of the job of system administrators is to make like nothing ever happened. Okay. Our job is to prevent failures. It's also a bit of a thankless job in the sense of, this thing about IT administrators is, if everything is working perfectly, if your mobile phone is working and your Wi-Fi is working and your internet is working and YouTube is streaming and Netflix, everything is working fine, It means you don't really need a systems administrator, right?
No,
Ah,
they are doing exactly the job.
exactly. Because everything is working fine, that is why you have this, or because you have a system administrator, that is why everything's working fine. And often what happens is, if things go wrong, and the system administrator jumps in and he fixes it, he becomes the hero, right? But if the things go wrong, he jumps in and he can't fix it, he's incompetent. It's not true, it's just sometimes you can't fix it. Alright, so, but one of the things, and what this talks is about as well, is using server monitoring software. So instead of only waiting for something to happen, you want to know trends, you want to know when something might happen. So for that we need a server monitoring system. Just to let you know, there's different type of server monitoring software. Okay, the first one is actually software which sits on the computer itself, so you can connect to the server and you can see what is happening on the server. Examples of that is Top or HTOP, but what I really want to talk about is the other type of server management software. This is software that is not run on each server, it is run centrally on a control server. And what you do is and I'll show there's different ways you can configure it, but the systems administrator from this point can see how many servers there are. Okay? They can see, let me just do it with how many servers there are. It can see, you have Domino servers here. I saw you have email servers, print servers, workstations. And you can easily see, there's a problem with one of the Domino servers. This is just a demo, I'm sure your servers are fine. This is a tool called SpiceWorks. You also get other tools like SolarWinds, quite big. And then also if you're very Microsoft based, you have System Center Operations Manager. Between these three, SpiceWorks is free. Okay, SolarWinds gets expensive. Microsoft Operations Manager could get very expensive based on the amount of licensing you have. And then you have one that is open source, Nagios. It's just very difficult, in my opinion, to configure, and it doesn't look as nice as any of these. Alright. So now we know there's software available that you can look at centrally, that doesn't look after the service for you. It's not that smart yet, maybe in the future, but at least it's able to inform the systems administrator that there's a problem. But the question is, how does it know there's a problem? Okay, and there's two different ways we can configure it. The one is the pull method, and this is where we actually connect from the central computer, we connect to the different servers, we're going to ask them, how are you doing today? Or every 5 minutes we ask them, how are they doing? Or every 30 minutes, every 8 hours, depending how much traffic you want to have on your network. And what you do is it effectively logs into the remote computer. With its Linux, it connects for SSH. If it's Windows, with the Windows account. It runs the standard operating system script, and then it returns the results which are passed. Okay. The second method is what we call the push method. Okay, and this, I call it the push method. I haven't actually heard of pull and push used elsewhere. I just use it. And what we do over here is we configure each one of the servers to communicate with the central server. Okay, so there's not a schedule of when you communicate, but we call it and it uses simple network management protocol and SNMP traps. What this does is the event notifications are sent from each server to the monitoring station, and it's configured to speak with remote server. There's a couple of things involved, and I'll show you some of it. So you have the management station, which is configured on each one of these servers. On each one of these servers you can configure them to speak with the management station. But the benefit is you can also speak with network equipment, right? So you can see how your routers are doing, how your switches are doing. And then the alerts get sent to the administrator. There's a couple of more things that's important, the difference between the push and the pull. With the push method, you need to have the SNMP servers running on your host. So whether this is a Linux machine or whether it's a Windows machine. This is an example of installing SNMP on a Windows machine. You also need to have certain firewall ports open. There's generally with SNMP more configuration needed compared to just using SSH port 22, which is almost always open. Then you also have something called a community string, and this is, I mean, it's not really security, but it's limited amount of security in the sense of each system needs to know the community string to be able to communicate with the SNMP server. Alright, so I actually want to skip to the end, and then I'll go one back, and this is talking about some of the problems. I should have had one before the questions. So one of the areas that is very useful for you to maybe do some research in, or even write code at one time, is to help systems administrators with the problems that they have at the moment. So one of the problems we have is we actually have too many alerts. So if you're looking after 5,000 servers and you get 200 alerts every day, after a while you get bored of it. Okay, so we call that alert blindness, just like advertising. After a while you don't see it anymore. Or apathy, where you just don't care. Okay, both can have very bad results. The second thing is you want to have historical references of issues to determine how important the alert is. Okay, examples of this is a couple of years ago I was involved with a research project where I developed a framework for doing what we call concern level assessment. Okay, examples of this is you want to use multiple aspects to increase the urgency or the importance of alert based on the status of the server. Not only the status, but also the historical status. To give you guys examples of this is, if you find out that the hard drive is almost full and there is unusual high network traffic, then it sounds like there's probably maybe an attack happening. Okay, so you can have multiple aspects of looking at the problem. But if you compare the same problem of the server, which is the hard drive is full, but it is usually full around this time of the day, because during this time of the day there's generally a backup running, but it's not something to worry about because in half an hour those 10 files get deleted and the server is fine. You know, a colleague can tell you that, but the system doesn't know that yet. And these are the type of, you know, smartness in the server administrator or the system management software that we're looking for. You can go and read more about this. I don't have the direct link for you, but if you go to researchgate.net, which is a brilliant resource, and you search for me, Louis Slabbert, you'll see some of the research that I've published over there, and my colleagues wrote up a lot about it. We won some awards. It was a big deal. All right, so the last thing I could maybe end up with before questions is the importance to make it easy for your users to help you, whether you're the programmer, whether you're the systems administrator, or even if you're the CEO of the company. And that is, you really need to make it easy for your users to get in touch. So one of the things that we did at the university is we installed help desk. I've actually installed multiple versions of help desks, and we tested the different ones without the users knowing it was happening. The way we did this is we made it simple. Okay, what's the simplest thing? Email, right? So we set up an email address, sattechnicians@mdx.ac.uk. It used to be called EIS Help Desk. You know, before that, so even the name changed, but we just point as your email address changes, we just put a pointer to the new email address, so you don't disrupt users. And that email address gets captured by the help desk system. Gets converted into a ticket. Once it is a ticket, it is something that multiple technicians or server administrators can deal with. Versus if it's just email between me and you, who knows about the email? Me and you. If you go on holiday, only me. If I go on holiday, only you. Right? So use a help desk. We also ask the students to, when they copy, when there's a problem with a server or with a computer, copy in someone else as well. You know, copy in the lecturer, for instance. we also tell them there's various other ways as well. This is mostly so that if it's server related, contact us. You know, if there's something wrong with your laptop, you know, your personal laptop, you know, yeah, let's move on. And then if it's urgent, still give people an alternative, right? So what you can do is with the email that they receive to say, thank you for contacting technical support, your ticket number is this. If this is mission critical, for instance, you know, okay, let's just say it's mission critical, here's a contact number so people can also call. Okay. Alright, so I have a couple of resources here for you. One is the ResearchGate, others are Spiceworks, SolarWinds, and then if you want to read up a little bit more about SNMP, because it is very powerful, you know, if you configure it right. I personally we don't really use this because there's some restrictions on our network. But these are the tools that I really recommend, even if you just want to support 10, 50, 1,000 users. Right. So that is me. Do you have any questions? No, you're happy? Okay, you're feeling like system administrators and programmers are going to work better together? Good. And you guys, do you have something to say?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So.
Yes, this is Cairo, and those are the pyramids. Kind of cool.